In a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a bustling city, life moved at a steady pace. People went about their routines, heading to work in the mornings, coming home in the evenings, and spending weekends catching up with family or friends. Among them was Maya Johnson, a 32-year-old African-American woman who had lived in the area for nearly 5 years. She was known as a kind-hearted and hard-working individual, beloved by her students at the local elementary school where she taught 3rd grade. Her days were filled with lesson plans, grading papers, and making sure her young learners felt seen and heard. Outside of work, Maya enjoyed simple pleasures, reading novels, tending to her small garden, and taking long walks to clear her mind. On this particular evening, Maya decided to step outside after dinner. The day had been busy, and she felt the need to stretch her legs and breathe in some fresh air before settling down to finish grading assignments. Dressed casually in a pair of jeans, sneakers, and a light jacket, she grabbed her phone and headphones, plugged into her favorite playlist, and headed out the door. The streets were calm, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, and the distant chirping of crickets added a soothing soundtrack to her walk. Maya strolled along the sidewalk, lost in thought. She loved moments like these when the world seemed peaceful and predictable. As she passed rows of houses, nodding politely at neighbors sitting on their porches, she couldn't help but feel grateful for her little corner of the world. But just as she turned onto a quieter stretch of road, the tranquility shattered abruptly. Without warning, 2 police cars came speeding down the street, tires screeching as they skidded to a halt mere feet away from her. Red and blue lights flashed wildly, casting eerie shadows across the pavement. Maya froze, startled and confused. Before she could react, 4 officers leapt out of the vehicles, surrounding her with flashlights pointed directly at her face. The sudden intrusion left her disoriented, squinting against the harsh beams of light. "Ma'am, stop right there," one officer barked loudly, his voice sharp and commanding. "What are you doing out here?" Taken aback, Maya raised her hands, slightly unsure of what was happening. "I'm just taking a walk," she replied calmly, trying to keep her tone even despite the rising tension in the air. "Is something wrong?" The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. One of them stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "We received reports of suspicious activity in the area," he said gruffly. "You match the description of someone we're looking for." Maya blinked, her heart beginning to race. Suspicious activity? Description? None of it made sense. She hadn't done anything unusual, just a regular evening stroll. "I live around here," she explained, gesturing vaguely toward the direction of her house. "I've been walking this route for years. Can you tell me what I supposedly did?" Instead of answering her question, the officers demanded her ID. Maya complied, pulling it out of her pocket and handing it over. While one officer examined the card, another began asking intrusive questions. "Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Do you always walk alone at night?" Each query felt more accusatory than the last, chipping away at Maya's patience. Despite her growing frustration, she tried to remain composed. Arguing wouldn't help. She knew that much from experience. Instead, she answered each question truthfully, hoping they would see she posed no threat. But the harassment didn't stop there. One officer instructed her to empty her pockets while another rummaged through her bag without permission. They found nothing incriminating, just keys, her wallet, and a few tissues. But that didn't seem to matter. As the minutes dragged on, Maya grew increasingly aware of how dehumanizing the situation was. These men weren't interested in finding answers. They were targeting her based on assumptions rooted in prejudice. Their dismissive remarks and condescending tones only reinforced this reality. At one point, one of the officers laughed sarcastically when Maya asked why she was being detained. "Relax, lady," he sneered. "If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about." Inside, Maya seethed. She wanted to scream, to demand respect, to remind them that she was a human being, not a criminal. But she swallowed her anger, knowing that lashing out might only make things worse. So she stood there silently, enduring the humiliation as they continued their unwarranted search. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that the officers finally let her go, offering no apology or explanation for their actions. By the time Maya returned home, her legs felt heavy and her chest tightened with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and disbelief. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered racism or bias, but it hit differently tonight. Being treated like a suspect simply because of the color of her skin was infuriating, yet she also felt powerless to stop it. For hours, Maya sat in her living room replaying the events in her mind. She wondered if the officers would face consequences for their behavior, or if anyone cared enough to hold them accountable. Exhaustion eventually pulled her into bed, but sleep eluded her. All she could think about was how unfair the world still was, and how much work remained to be done. The next morning, Maya woke up feeling drained, both physically and emotionally. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind like a dark cloud, refusing to fade away. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, replaying every moment: the blinding flashlights, the accusatory questions, the invasive searches, and the dismissive attitudes of the officers. Each memory stung, leaving behind a mixture of anger, sadness, and frustration. But as much as she wanted to push it all aside and focus on her day, she knew she couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. After dragging herself out of bed, Maya brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat down at her kitchen table. Her phone buzzed, repeatedly with notifications, messages from friends checking in after noticing her late-night post about the incident. In her exhaustion last night, she had briefly shared what happened on social media, hoping someone might understand how violated she felt. Now, seeing the flood of responses made her realize just how deeply the issue resonated with others. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of being profiled, harassed, or mistreated by law enforcement. Some offered words of support, while others expressed outrage on her behalf. It was overwhelming but also unexpectedly comforting. For the first time since the ordeal, Maya didn't feel entirely alone. Her best friend Lisa called shortly after. "Hey, are you okay?" Lisa asked gently, her voice laced with concern. Maya hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I mean, I'm fine physically, but it's hard to explain. I can't stop thinking about it." Lisa listened patiently as Maya recounted the details again, this time more slowly and deliberately. When she finished, there was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Lisa spoke firmly. "You can't let this slide, Maya. This isn't just about you. It's bigger than that. If we stay silent, nothing will ever change." At first, Maya resisted the idea. Fighting back meant confronting not only the officers involved but also the system that protected them. She worried about retaliation, backlash, or simply being ignored. But Lisa wouldn't let her give up so easily. "Think about it," Lisa urged. "If you don't speak up now, who will? And what happens the next time something like this happens, to you or someone else?" Reluctantly, Maya agreed to take action. That afternoon, she filed a formal complaint with the police department, detailing everything that had occurred. Sitting in front of her computer, typing out each word felt surreal. She described how the officers surrounded her without cause, searched her belongings without probable cause, and mocked her attempts to remain calm. She included timestamps, names, as far as she could remember, and even screenshots of her earlier social media post. Submitting the form gave her a small sense of relief, but deep down she wasn't optimistic. Complaints like hers often disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, never to be seen again. Still, filing the report was only the beginning. Later that evening, as Maya scrolled through her phone, she stumbled across a message from an unexpected source, Mr. Thompson, a retired journalist who lived across the street. He introduced himself briefly, explaining that he had witnessed the entire incident unfold from his porch. Horrified by what he saw, he discreetly recorded the interaction on his phone. "I thought you should know," he wrote. "If you want to use the footage, it's yours." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Proof, tangible evidence of what had happened. Up until now, It had been her word against theirs, a scenario all too familiar for victims of racial profiling. But this video changed everything. With trembling hands, she replied to Mr. Thompson, thanking him profusely for stepping forward. Within minutes, he sent over the clip, which showed the officers surrounding her, shining flashlights in her face, and rifling through her bag. Every detail matched her account perfectly. Watching the footage reignited Maya's determination. She knew she couldn't keep quiet, not when she had such powerful proof of wrongdoing. After consulting with Lisa and doing some research online, she decided to share the video publicly. That night, she crafted a heartfelt post accompanying the clip. "Last night I was walking home when 4 police officers stopped me without reason," she wrote. "They accused me of fitting the description of someone suspected of breaking into homes. No evidence, no justification, just assumptions. Based on my skin color, here's what really happened." She attached the video and hit publish. Within hours, the post exploded. Thousands of people viewed the video, sharing it across platforms and tagging local news outlets. Comments flooded in, many expressing shock, outrage, and solidarity. "This is disgusting," one user wrote. "How dare they treat you like this?" Another added, "Thank you for speaking up, Maya. Your courage is inspiring." Strangers began reaching out to offer legal advice, resources, and encouragement. Activists contacted her, eager to amplify her story and demand accountability. By the following day, the situation had escalated beyond anything Maya anticipated. Local reporters started calling, asking for interviews. Protesters gathered outside the police station holding signs that read, "Justice for Maya and End Racial Profiling." Even national news networks picked up the story, turning her personal experience into a symbol of broader systemic issues. Maya felt overwhelmed by the attention but also empowered. For once, people were listening, and they cared enough to act. The days passed. The pressure mounted on the police department. Reporters camped outside the precinct demanding answers. Community leaders organized rallies, drawing hundreds of supporters determined to make their voices heard. Social media hashtags trended nationwide, keeping the conversation alive. Meanwhile, Maya continued to speak out, granting interviews and attending protests despite her initial hesitation. Though the spotlight terrified her, she refused to back down. Every interview, every speech, every step forward brought her closer to justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had faced similar injustices. One particularly memorable moment came during a town hall meeting hosted by local activists. Maya stood nervously at the podium, gripping the microphone tightly. The room buzzed with anticipation as dozens of eyes turned toward her. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I never imagined I'd be here today," she admitted, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "What happened to me shouldn't have happened to anyone. I wasn't committing a crime. I was simply living my life. Yet because of the color of my skin, I was treated like a suspect, harassed and humiliated." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. "This fight isn't just about me," she continued. "It's about creating a world where no one has to endure what I did, where our worth isn't judged by stereotypes or biases, where justice truly means justice for all." When she finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as if to say, "We've got your back." Behind the scenes, however, the battle was far from over. While public outrage grew louder, the police department scrambled to contain the fallout. Internal meetings revealed cracks within the ranks, with higher-ups frantically trying to distance themselves from the officers involved. Whispers circulated about potential misconduct records and cover-ups, hinting at darker truths lurking beneath the surface. For Maya, these developments reinforced the importance of staying vigilant. Justice wouldn't come easily, but she was ready to fight for it no matter how long it took. As the days turned into weeks, the storm surrounding Maya's case showed no signs of calming. If anything, it grew fiercer with each passing day. The video of her encounter with the officers had become a rallying cry for justice, sparking outrage, not just locally but across the country. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying her story, turning hashtags like Suedan Justice for Maya and Jidon and racial profiling into trending topics. People from all walks of life, students, parents, activists, celebrities, joined the conversation, sharing their own experiences or simply voicing their support. It was clear that Maya's ordeal had struck a nerve, exposing the deep-rooted frustrations many felt about systemic racism and police misconduct. The pressure on the police department reached unprecedented levels. Reporters camped outside the precinct, bombarding officials with questions whenever they stepped out. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Local businesses displayed posters in their windows, showing solidarity with Maya, while community leaders organized marches and town hall meetings to keep the momentum alive. Even national news outlets covered the story extensively, framing it as yet another example of how racial bias continued to plague law enforcement institutions. Inside the police station, tensions ran high. Captain Reynolds, the head of the department, called an emergency meeting with his senior staff to address the growing crisis. His office was packed with officers, some sitting stiffly in chairs while others leaned against the walls, arms crossed defensively. The air buzzed with unease as Reynolds paced back and forth, his face flushed with anger. "This is a disaster," he snapped, slamming a stack of papers onto his desk. "We're drowning in bad press because of your stupidity." He pointed accusingly at Lieutenant Harris, the officer who had led the team that detained Maya. "What were you thinking? Pulling over a woman without probable cause? Searching her belongings like she was a criminal? Do you realize what this looks like?" Harris shifted uncomfortably under the weight of Reynolds's glare. "Sir, we were following protocol," he stammered. "There were reports of suspicious activity in the area. She matched the description." "Matched the description?" Reynolds cut him off, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean she's black, so obviously she must be up to no good? That's not protocol, that's profiling. And now we're paying the price for your idiocy." The room fell silent except for the sound of Reynolds' heavy breathing. No one dared to argue further. Everyone knew he wasn't just angry about the incident itself, but about the scrutiny it brought upon the entire department. For years, the precinct had managed to avoid major scandals by brushing complaints under the rug or blaming victims. But this time, things were different. Thanks to Maya's courage and Mr. Thompson's damning footage, the truth couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, Maya found herself navigating uncharted territory. As the public face of the movement, she became both a symbol of hope and a target of hostility. Supporters praised her bravery, sending messages of encouragement and gratitude. Strangers approached her at rallies, thanking her for speaking out and promising to stand by her side. Yet alongside the love came hate. Trolls flooded her social media accounts with racist comments and threats, accusing her of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. Some even went as far as claiming the officers were justified in stopping her. Despite the negativity, Maya refused to let it break her spirit. With Lisa by her side, she learned to block toxic users and focus on the positives. More importantly, she leaned on the growing network of allies who rallied around her. Activists helped her draft statements, lawyers offered pro bono assistance, and organizers ensured her voice remained central to the campaign. Together, they planned strategies to hold the police accountable, from filing lawsuits to pushing for policy reforms. One afternoon, Maya attended a strategy session hosted by a local civil rights group. The room buzzed with energy as volunteers discussed everything from media outreach to upcoming protests. At the center of the table sat Marcus Green, a seasoned attorney known for taking on high-profile cases involving police brutality. With his sharp suits and commanding presence, Marcus exuded confidence. Yet when he spoke, his tone softened, filled with genuine empathy. "Maya, I want you to know something," he said, looking directly at her. "You're not alone in this fight. We've got your back every step of the way. But I also need you to understand. It won't be easy. These systems are designed to protect themselves. They'll try to discredit you, delay investigations, and make you doubt yourself. But if we stay united, we can win." His words resonated deeply with Maya. She nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm ready," she replied firmly. Whatever it takes. Over the next few days, the legal battle intensified. Armed with the video evidence and witness testimonies, Maya's team filed a lawsuit against the officers involved, accusing them of racial profiling, unlawful detention, and harassment. They also requested an independent investigation into the department's practices, arguing that systemic issues needed to be addressed. News of the lawsuit spread quickly, reigniting public interest and putting even more pressure on the authorities. But the real game-changer came unexpectedly. During the internal investigation ordered by Captain Reynolds, leaked documents surfaced revealing shocking details about the officer's past behavior. One of them, Officer Daniels, had multiple complaints filed against him for similar incidents, all of which had been dismissed or buried by higher-ups. Emails between Reynolds and other senior officials showed they actively covered up misconduct to avoid scandal. When these revelations hit the headlines, outrage exploded once again. Protesters took to the streets in larger numbers, demanding immediate action. Politicians scrambled to respond, fearful of losing voter support. Mayor Patricia Harris, facing mounting criticism, held a televised press conference to announce sweeping reforms. Standing behind a podium flanked by flags, she addressed the nation with solemn resolve. "What happened to Maya Johnson is unacceptable," she declared, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It is a stark reminder of the work we still need to do to ensure fairness and equality within our institutions. Starting today, we will implement mandatory body cameras for all officers, establish independent oversight committees to review complaints, and enforce zero tolerance for racial profiling. Those responsible for this incident will be held accountable." Her announcement sent shockwaves through the city. While some praised her decisiveness, others questioned whether the reforms would go far enough. Skeptics argued that change required more than promises. It demanded concrete action. Nevertheless, the message was clear. The status quo could no longer stand. For Maya, hearing the mayor's words brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt vindicated knowing her efforts hadn't been in vain. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the lingering pain of what she'd endured. Late that night, sitting alone on her porch, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The stars twinkled above, casting a soft glow over the neighborhood. Despite everything, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, her struggle could inspire meaningful change. As she sipped her tea, Maya thought about the road ahead. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in weeks, she felt less afraid. She realized she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Thousands of people stood beside her, united in their demand for justice. And though the scars of that fateful night would always remain, they served as reminders of her strength and resilience. With a deep breath, Maya smiled softly to herself. Change was slow, messy, and often painful, but it was possible, and she had taken the first step toward making it happen. The fallout from the leaked document sent shockwaves through the city, forcing everyone, from ordinary citizens to top government officials, to confront uncomfortable truths. For Maya, the revelations were both validating and infuriating. It wasn't just that Officer Daniels had a history of misconduct. It was the fact that his superiors, including Captain Reynolds, had knowingly protected him. The emails exposed a culture of complicity within the police department, one where accountability took a back seat to reputation management and political convenience. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic corruption, plain and simple. As the story dominated headlines, public outrage reached fever pitch. Protesters poured into the streets by the thousands, their chants echoing through neighborhoods and downtown areas alike. Signs bearing slogans like "No justice, no peace," and "Fire the racists" became ubiquitous. Local businesses closed, temporarily to allow employees to join marches, while schools held assemblies to discuss racism and police reform. Even celebrities weighed in, using their platforms to amplify Maya's voice and call for immediate action. Inside the police station, panic set in. Officers whispered nervously in hallways, unsure who might be next to face scrutiny. Lieutenant Harris tried to distance himself from the controversy, claiming he'd merely followed orders, but no one believed him, not even his colleagues. Captain Reynolds, meanwhile, found himself cornered. His attempts to deflect blame onto junior officers failed miserably when reporters dug up old interviews where he boasted about maintaining discipline within the ranks. The more he squirmed, the worse things got for him. Facing mounting pressure, Mayor Patricia Harris made good on her promise for accountability. She announced the suspension of all 4 officers involved in Maya's case pending further investigation. Captain Reynolds resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew it was due to the scandal. While some viewed these moves as progress, others remained skeptical. Activists argued that suspensions weren't enough. They wanted criminal charges filed against those responsible. As one protester shouted during a rally, "Suspension is a slap on the wrist. We need justice, not PR stunts." For Maya, watching, the developments unfold felt surreal. One moment, she was an ordinary woman taking a quiet evening walk. Now she was at the center of a national conversation about race and policing. The attention overwhelmed her at times, but she refused to step back. Instead, she leaned harder into the fight, attending press conferences, speaking at rallies, and meeting with lawmakers to push for meaningful reforms. Her courage inspired countless others to share their own stories, creating a domino effect of awareness and activism. Yet despite the victories, Maya couldn't ignore the personal toll the ordeal was taking. Sleepless nights became routine, her mind racing with thoughts of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. What if the officers fought back? What if the reforms didn't stick? What if nothing changed in the long run? These questions haunted her, gnawing at her resolve. During moments of weakness, she wondered if she'd bitten off more than she could chew. Was it worth sacrificing her peace of mind for a cause that seemed insurmountable? Lisa noticed the toll it was taking on her friend. One evening, after another exhausting day of interviews and meetings, Lisa showed up at Maya's door with takeout food and a bottle of wine. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," Lisa said gently, setting the bags down on the kitchen counter. Maya sighed, sinking into a chair. "I feel like I am," she admitted. "Every time I think we're making progress, something reminds me how far we still have to go. Sometimes I wonder if it's ever going to end." Lisa poured them each a glass of wine and sat beside her. "Of course it's overwhelming. You're trying to dismantle centuries of injustice. That's not something you can fix overnight, but look at what you've already accomplished. People are talking about this stuff in ways they never did before. You've given a voice to so many who felt silenced. Don't underestimate the power of that." Her words struck a chord with Maya. Yes, the road ahead was daunting, but she hadn't started this journey alone, and she wouldn't finish it alone either. With renewed determination, Maya resolved to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard it got. A few days later, Maya received an invitation to speak at a major civil rights conference. Organizers praised her bravery and asked her to deliver the keynote address, sharing her experience as a catalyst for broader discussions about systemic racism. Initially hesitant, public speaking wasn't exactly her forte. She agreed after much encouragement from Lisa and Marcus Green, her attorney. If there was ever a platform to make her voice heard, this was it. On the day of the event, Maya stood backstage, clutching her notes tightly. Her heart pounded as she listened to the MC introduce her. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. Spotlights blinded her momentarily, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw rows upon rows of faces, looking up at her expectantly. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Standing here today feels surreal," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "Just a few weeks ago, I was an ordinary person, living an ordinary life. Then in the span of an hour, everything changed. I went from being invisible to hyper-visible, not because of anything I did, but because of the assumptions made about me based on my skin color." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What happened to me isn't unique. Far too many people, especially Black and brown individuals, have faced similar treatment. Some have been stopped without cause. Others have been brutalized or worse. And yet our cries for justice often fall on deaf ears. Until now." Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued. This movement isn't just about me. It's about every person who has been told they don't belong, that their lives don't matter, that their dignity can be stripped away without consequence. It's about demanding better, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. Because if we don't fight for change, who will? By the time she finished, the audience erupted into cheers, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Tears streamed down Maya's face as she realized the magnitude of what she had achieved. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel proud, not just of her resilience, but of the collective strength of everyone fighting alongside her. Back home, the momentum only grew stronger. Inspired by Maya's speech, grassroots organizations launched campaigns to educate communities about their rights during police encounters. Schools incorporated lessons on racial equity into their curriculums. Politicians introduced legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement agencies. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Still, challenges persisted. Critics argued that focusing on individual cases like Maya's detracted from addressing larger systemic issues. Others accused activists of being overly aggressive, claiming their methods alienated potential allies. Despite these criticisms, Maya remained steadfast. She understood that change required patience, persistence, and unity, and she was willing to do whatever it took to see it through. One evening, as she prepared for bed, Maya glanced out her window at the neighborhood below. Streetlights illuminated empty sidewalks, casting long shadows across the pavement. Just weeks earlier, those same streets had felt unsafe, tainted by memories of harassment and humiliation. Now they symbolized hope, a reminder that even in darkness light could break through. With a soft smile, Maya turned off the lamp beside her bed and climbed under the covers. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new obstacles, and new opportunities to make a difference. But for tonight, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she had done everything she could to spark change. And sometimes that was enough. Months had passed since that fateful night when Maya Johnson's life changed forever. The whirlwind of protests, media attention, and legal battles had begun to settle, leaving behind a mix of progress and lingering questions. For Maya, the journey was far from over, but she could finally take a step back to reflect on how far she and the community had come. The officers involved in her case faced serious consequences. 2 were fired outright, while the other 2 awaited trial on charges of misconduct and racial profiling. Captain Reynolds's resignation marked the beginning of a broader reckoning within the police department. Independent oversight committees were established, tasked with reviewing complaints and ensuring accountability. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and training programs focused on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques were introduced. While some critics argued these measures didn't go far enough, others saw them as crucial first steps toward meaningful reform. For Maya, seeing tangible changes brought a sense of vindication. She often thought about the countless victims of police brutality whose stories had been ignored or buried. Their voices had fueled her determination to keep fighting, even when the odds felt insurmountable. Now, standing on the shoulders of those who came before her, Maya recognized that her victory wasn't just personal, it belonged to everyone who had ever dared to demand justice. Yet, despite the progress, Maya knew the scars of that night would never fully heal. There were days when she replayed the incident in her mind, reliving the humiliation and fear. Walking past the spot where it happened still made her chest tighten, though she refused to let it control her. Instead, she channeled her emotions into advocacy work, collaborating with organizations dedicated to reforming policing practices and addressing systemic racism. Her bravery earned her recognition, including an award for civic leadership. But Maya insisted the real heroes were the people standing alongside her in the fight for equality. One crisp autumn morning, Maya stood outside her elementary school, greeting students as they arrived for class. Teaching had always been her passion, but now it carried an added layer of purpose. She wanted to inspire her young learners to dream big, to believe in their worth, and to understand the importance of speaking up against injustice. You have power, she told them during a lesson on civil rights. Your voice matters, no matter how small you think it is. After school, Maya attended a town hall meeting hosted by local activists. The room buzzed with energy as residents discussed ongoing efforts to hold institutions accountable. Speakers shared updates on policy changes, celebrated recent wins, and outlined plans for future initiatives. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, greeted by warm applause. I want to thank each of you for your courage and resilience, she began, her voice steady and sincere. When I first decided to share my story, I didn't know what to expect. I was scared, terrified actually, that no one would listen. But you proved me wrong. Together we showed that change is possible when we stand united. She paused, letting her words sink in. That doesn't mean the work is done, far from it. Racism and inequality are deeply rooted in our society, and dismantling them will take time, effort, and persistence. But if we continue to push forward, if we refuse to stay silent, we can create a world where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected. Her speech resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. Afterward, strangers approached her to express gratitude, sharing how her story had inspired them to get involved. A teenage girl handed her a handmade card that read, "Thank you for being brave. You're my hero." Maya hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by emotion. As weeks turned into months, Maya found balance in her life again. She returned to her routines, gardening, hiking, and spending quiet evenings reading, but with a renewed perspective. The experience had taught her the value of vulnerability, solidarity, and hope. It reminded her that while the road to justice was long and uneven, every step mattered. Every voice counted. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Maya reflected on the journey. The sky blazed with hues of orange and pink, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. Children played in the distance, their laughter echoing through the air. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, almost normal. Yet Maya knew appearances could be deceiving. Beneath the surface, challenges remained. Inequality persisted, systems resisted change, and new battles loomed on the horizon. But Maya wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced her fears head-on and emerged stronger because of it. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. And she had discovered the incredible strength of community, the power of people coming together to lift each other up and fight for a better future. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Lisa. Thinking of you tonight. So proud of everything you've done. Maya smiled softly, typing a quick reply. Thanks, sis. Couldn't have done it without you. As darkness fell and stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Maya leaned back in her chair, sipping a cup of tea. She thought about the future, a future where no one would have to endure what she did simply because of the color of their skin. A future where children grew up believing in fairness and justice. A future built on love, compassion, and understanding. Change was slow, messy, and often painful, but Maya believed it was worth it. She had played a part in making it happen, and that gave her peace. With a final glance at the stars above, she whispered softly to herself, "We're getting there."